All right, thank you, Mara, and thank you, my Jewish learning. I didn't know if I was going to know any of you all today, and it's exciting to look around and realize that I know a decent number of you. So, hello to the people I know. I'm glad to make your acquaintance. To the people I don't. And the way this is going to work, we've got so little time. I'm going to talk at you a little bit to set us up, and then we're going to try to have a conversation. There are a ton of you, so when we're having a conversation, you want to keep it short and sweet. You want to be raising your Zoom hand because I can't see you all at the same time. And if you've got something that's better off showing up in the chat, put it in the chat and I'll read it out loud. So, hi. Here we are in Vayikra at the very beginning of Leviticus. And Leviticus is one of those texts that the rabbis among you, the cantors among you, the educators among you, when you get to Leviticus every year, there's a little bit of a, okay, what am I going to do this time, right? There's a, here we are again in all of these laws, in all of these like very set priestly obligations that mostly have to do with a structure that is no longer in existence for us. Like, Temple's gone, Mishkan's gone. Let's read Leviticus. And it's a struggle, right? Every year you're faced with this book and you say, okay, what am I going to do this time? And what you all are going to do with me this time is follow the same method that one of those first generations of rabbis who were facing the problem of what to do with Leviticus after the temple was gone faced. So they faced the same problem and they found a solution, and their solution was Vayikra Rabbah. Their solution was the midrash on the book of Leviticus. And are you guys, are you familiar with Vayikra Rabbah? Hands up if this is a text that's, oh, hello, very nice. So if you've had the pleasure, the delight of reading this before, you know how good this is. If you haven't, Vayikra Rabbah, the midrash on Leviticus, takes what are very, very nitty gritty physical details about fat and blood and gore, and turns the discussion into something philosophical. Takes all of those gritty Leviticus details and finds the meaning of life in them. And that's one of the reasons that Leviticus Rabbah, that Vayikra Rabbah, the midrash, is so cool. So we're going to be reading just one tiny section of Vayikra Rabbah today that comments on one verse in Leviticus 4 in our Parashat. Oh, great question, Gary. Gary asks, well, that sounds like a great book. How do I get it? So you can find it on Sefaria, but most of it is not in translation on Sefaria. You can also buy it in translation, and there are a number of different translations. The one I brought for you today is the Soncino translation. This is the Soncino group translated a number of the different midrashim, and it's an old translation, so it's got that like clunky language that you'd find, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago, but it's got great footnotes if you're a footnote sort of person. Thanks for the question, Gary. All right, so the midrash we're reading is going to comment on just one verse of Vayikra of Leviticus, and it's going to be one of a number of different midrashim commenting on just one verse. So I'm going to read you the text, and y'all, I always am going to read. Oh, I'll put the link for the source sheet as well in the chat. Thank you, Rabbi Joan Sachs. So I'm going to read you the verse. I read it in Hebrew when I'm reading Torah or Tanakh, but then once we get to the Midrash, we'll do that in the English translation. I'll also read the English translation for the Tanakh bit for you. So we have V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moses saying, we know this bit, it keeps happening. Deber al bnei Yisrael lemor, speak to the Israelites saying, Nefesh ki techate b'shogega. Okay, so first interesting word there, nefesh. Nefesh, like that's a word that some of you all are familiar, right? Nod at me, right? We know that word, nefesh. And if we don't know that word, Ellen, we're about to, so it's all right. So nefesh, the way we use that word in modern Hebrew, the way that rabbinically that word is used, that word means soul. However, in biblical Hebrew, when we use the word nefesh, it's a way of saying like a person, adam, ish. So here in the biblical Hebrew text, the meaning when we say nefesh ki techata is a person who has sinned. We'll see in the Midrash, it's going to pick up and say, okay, we're not talking about a person, we're talking about a soul. But in the original Tanakh text, the original Torah text, the meaning of nefesh is just a person. All right, so a person who has sinned b'shogaga. All right, this is the big word that a lot hinges on here, b'shogaga. Normally translated as unintentionally, right? Unintentional sin. And then the Torah text goes on to define for us what unintentional sin is, saying, Mikol mitzvot Hashem asher lo ta'asena, va'asa me'achad mehem. So person sins unintentionally, and I'm going to do the translation out of order to make it make a little bit more sense in English, by doing one of the commandments of God, which God has said you shouldn't do. So what is an unintentional sin? Unintentional sin is to do something you're not supposed to do, like by mistake. And later in this parasha, it gets clarified for us what it means to do something unintentionally is either to say like, oops, I was playing with my bow and arrow and it accidentally killed somebody's bull. That's a horrible example, but you get the point. Like I wasn't aiming for the bull, but it happened. And the other way to sin unintentionally is let's say that I went and ate a cheeseburger because I didn't know that we weren't supposed to eat cheeseburgers. And then someone comes, is like, Bex, what are you doing? Have you not heard of this law? The Torah says, thou shalt not eat cheeseburgers. And from this, I learned that I've sinned unintentionally and I shouldn't eat cheeseburgers anymore. All right. So let's jump into the Midrash, although let me just take a second. If anybody has comments on that they want to throw up in the chat, just that Torah text we've looked at so far. Oh, yes, thank you, Scott. Scott says nefesh means male or female person. If it said Adam, it would be male. Scott, I'd love to talk with you more about that. The way I understand it is if it's Adam, it's generally male or female. If it's Ish, it's generally male. We have elsewhere Adam ki, and then we say Ish or Isha. So Adam who, and we elaborate saying a man or a woman. Other thoughts about just this Torah text anybody wants to throw up in the chat? To throw up a thought is kind of a weird phrase, right? Want to put up a thought in the chat? Okay, Rabbi Joan, let me just put the text in the chat one more time. It's the link I just put in the chat. It's a link, a Google Doc link. All right, so we're going to move on to the Midrash. The Midrash is going to take that verse that says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, when a nephesh sins. And as I said, instead of saying nephesh person, it's going to say when a soul sins. And immediately the Midrash will jump into what's called the mashal. Nod at me, make hands if the word mashal means something to you. No. Weird Hebrew word brought to you by Bex Rosenblatt. Thank you. All right, Deborah knows. I knew you'd know, Deborah. Mashal is hard to translate word. Sometimes it means something like a parable or an allegory. I think the easiest way to understand it is often in Midrash, we'll have a situation from the Torah, and Rabbi so-and-so will come in and say, that's like this other totally made up situation, which I'm going to describe to you. I'm going to tell you a story, a fable almost, about a totally made up situation that will clarify for us something about the original Torah situation. So we're going to read this mashal, this example, this parable, this allegory. And then in the Nimshal, the second half of this text, we're going to apply the example, the parable, the allegory, the mashal, to what's happening in the Torah text. That makes sense? You with me? Awesome. Cool. So, and I'm going to read this just in the English. You've got the Hebrew text there for those of you who want to get up into your elbows in it. All right. And once again, this is from the Sensino translation. This is not my translation. So, Rabbi Yishmael taught. This, meaning this quote, may be compared to the case of a king who had an orchard containing excellent first fruits, and he placed there 2 watchmen, one lame and the other blind. He said to them, "Be careful with these fine first fruits." After some days, the lame man said to the blind one, "I see fine first fruits in the orchard." Said the blind man to him, "Come, let us eat them." "Am I then able to walk?" said the lame man. "Can I then see?" retorted the blind man. The lame man rode on the back of the blind man, and thus they ate the first fruits and sat down again, each in his place. After some days, the king came into that orchard and said to them, "Where are the fine first fruits?" The blind man replied, "My lord the king, can I then see?" The lame man replied, "My lord the king, can I then walk?" What did the king, who was a man of insight, do with them? He placed the lame man astride the blind man, and they began to move about. Said the king to them, "Thus have you done and eaten the first fruits." All right, so I guess the one thing I didn't tell you about Meshalim, about Mashals, is that they're totally made up stories that are sometimes a bit bizarre, that are sometimes a little weird. So what I'm going to ask you, and you guys please answer either in the chat or by putting up Zoom hands, and I will call on you and you'll be succinct. You'll have short, pithy answers. What I'm going to ask you is, what is the king doing here, hiring 2 watchmen, one who's lame and one who's blind, to guard the best fruit of this orchard? Why does the king choose people with physical disabilities, people who might not, like, if I were hiring guards, I might not have chosen a blind person to guard my orchard. I might not have chosen someone who couldn't walk to guard my orchard. Explain this to me. Make it make sense. What's this king thinking? Okay. I'll give you a second. You're in the chat or raising a Zoom hand. All right. We've got Elizabeth saying, King had a plan here. King wasn't so much about guarding the first fruits. It's about getting these 2 people to cooperate, getting these 2 people to work together. Doreen, you agree? You say, okay, supposed to be working together. The point is to force them into a situation where they work together. Oh, and Elizabeth, you add, and I love this. Well, we might be thinking about the blind person and thinking, okay, it's only that they're blind, it's only that they're limited, but actually a blind person might be a great guard because they have better hearing. Okay. Oh, Ellen and Michael. Okay. Ellen and Michael is like, all right, you're gonna put people with your best fruits. You don't want them to be able to steal. Therefore, you put people who have physical ailments that prevent them from doing that, a blind person and a lame person. All right, Earl, you say because they're human. And I could make up what I think you mean, but Earl, I'd love to hear more about what the intent of that comment is. Okay. So Emily says to illustrate God's knowledge of human shortcomings. All right. So and we'll get to this in the Nimshal, right? If this is something that's about all humans, then maybe all humans are blind and lame. Maybe all humans are physically limited in some way. Okay. Ellen, go for it. Short and pithy.
So for me, a truly benign leader, a good leader, would be offering dignity to people and giving people, whether they have physical or mental disability, an opportunity to be part of the community. So that could be a good leader. I don't know that this is a biblical thing, but that would be somebody who would be a good leader today.
Yafei, awesome, Ellen. Thank you. Yeah, so it's similar to what Mitch Shore has just put in the chat too, right? That there's something about giving everybody a chance, that making accommodations so that everybody has an ability to be in community with each other, making accommodations so that everybody has access to the good stuff, the first fruits. Awesome, incredible. Okay. And then we've got a number of comments talking about that putting specifically Dafka, a blind person and a lame person together, leads to them getting to the point where they have to work together. Okay. So next question I'm going to ask for you is, so King comes into the orchard and says, where are my first fruits? And the blind man's like, listen, can I see him? And layman says, listen, can I walk? Why do you think the king is asking? The king, he knows the answer. The king figures out what happened. He puts the blind man piggyback on the lame man, and it's like, this is what you did. Why does he ask? And does that remind you of any other biblical text? Why does the king ask what had happened? why do the blind man and the lame man respond like, listen, couldn't have been me. Nothing to see here. Okay. Ooh, awesome. Awesome. Okay, so we're going way back to the beginning of Genesis, and this seems Garden of Eden-y, right? This seems very Garden of Eden-y. So it seems like after Eve and Adam eat of that fruit, God comes and asks where they are, asks what happened, and each of them is like, hey, it wasn't me, it was her. Wasn't me, it was a snake. Ugh, don't pay any attention to me, God. And in that parallel y'all are making, which I love, is so cool, right? Then we have that same idea of fruit, right? Of some sort of orchard with fruit that's not supposed to be eaten. We have that same idea of shemolim, of keeping, of saving, of guarding. That is the role of the humans. Really, really cool. And then David, I know you and I don't remember where from, but thank you for the great comment again. David says this is similar to Cain and Abel, and likewise at Mitch Shore, you said this is similar to Cain and Abel. Yeah, so second story, right after Garden of Eden, we have God coming and saying, hey, Cain, where's your brother? God knows. And Cain says, my brother's keeper, how should I know? So it seems like, and this is coming back to, who was it before? Somebody said brilliantly before, I think Ellen said before, that this is reminding us that everybody is human, that if we're thinking, okay, the lame man and the blind man, and that their lack of sight or lack of being able to walk makes them somehow other, then here they're the same as Cain, they're the same as Adam and Eve, they are exhibiting the same very human qualities as literally the mother of all humans. Yafei. Okay, Earl, short and sweet. Oh, yeah.
Finally, I was able to unmute. Sorry. The host had it so I couldn't unmute myself. So to answer your question, I see Moses as a mid-level bureaucrat. He has to report to the boss, but nobody else, the boss doesn't talk to anyone else. So the people, that is the people he supervises, which are the people of Israel, are skeptical of what they're being told because they're not hearing it directly from God. So that's what I meant about having the metaphor here, is that the people who work for you always will have shortcomings.
Oh,
and
awesome.
Always, we all have shortcomings. The idea of original sin in that sense. We all have shortcomings. We've all done things that are wrong. And we all need to be forgiven in some way.
Awesome. Okay. Really cool.
Okay, no, I'm sorry.
So that, like, what is it to be human? That to be human is to be limited. To be human is to be blind and lame. To be human is to want to eat those first fruits and then to lie about it. Yafei. Okay. We've got some amazing comments in the chat, but I'm going to keep moving. So if you haven't looked at those comments in the chat, go read them. And we're going to keep moving and look at the nimshal. Look at the way that the Midrash takes this parable, allegory, example, fable, and explicitly applies it to the situation of a soul who sins unintentionally. So I'll read it again in the English. And Mara, yep, you're perfect. Even so will the Holy One, blessed be he, in the time to come, say to the soul, why hast thou sinned before me? And the soul will answer, O master of the universe, it is not I that sinned, but the body it is that sinned. Why? Since leaving it, the body, I am like a clean bird flying through the air. As for me, how have I sinned? God will also say to the body, why hast thou sinned before me? And the body will reply, O master of the universe, not have I sinned, the soul it is that has sinned. Why, since it left me, I am cast about like a stone thrown upon the ground. Have I then sinned before thee? What will the Holy One, blessed be he, do to them? He will bring the soul and force it into the body and judge both as one. As it is said, he will call, and this is a quote from Psalms 54, he will call to the heavens above and the earth for the judgment of his people. His people there is Amo. So we're interpreting that quote to say, he will call to the heavens above, meaning he's going to bring the soul. He'll call to the Shemaim to bring the Neshama. And to the earth, he'll call to the earth. Why? To bring the body. For what purpose? For judgment. And here we're reading for judgment emo rather than judgment amo. We're vocalizing that word a little bit differently. So rather than saying judgment of his people, we're saying judgment with it. He'll call to the heavens to bring the soul and to the earth to bring the body for judgment with the soul. Tov. All right. So gets a little more complicated here in the Nimshal, right? All of a sudden we're taking the idea of the blind man and the lame man and saying, okay, we're understanding one of them as the body and one of them as the soul. And each of them is saying, like, I couldn't do it. Like, I was incapable of sinning because I, the soul, have no body anymore. And the body is like, I had no soul. I had no dad. I had no anything that could give me the ability to make this plan and animate my clay and make me do that. And God's like, okay, no. I'm gonna put you body and soul back together, just like the blind man sat on the piggyback ride of the lame man, and I'm going to judge you together. All right. So really interesting, taking this, what's that saying about the idea of unintentional sin? How does unintentional sin happen? How do we understand unintentional sin in light of this idea of the soul saying, I couldn't do it without the body saying, I couldn't do it without the soul, this like pushing off a responsibility, and God saying, like, I know how you work, I built you and I can rebuild you. What's happening with unintentional sin here? Cool. Okay. Earl says scapegoating. Classic Jewish answer. Okay. And Mitt and Greta, you're saying similar things. You're saying, okay, we didn't know it was wrong before it happened. And Greta, you say, well, yeah, we categorize things as unintentional to say, like it was by mistake, so it's not my fault. That the default way of understanding unintentional is a pushing away of responsibility. And here God's saying, like, okay, unintentional exists, but that doesn't mean that you're not responsible for it. Okay. Oh, David, beautiful again. We are not always shalem, we're not always whole. That, and this comes back to what many of you were saying about the mashal, right? That the lame man and the blind man represented all humanity, that there's something lacking in all of us, that's what it means to be human. And if we were to interpret that with the nimshal, with the explanation here, perhaps what it is to be human is to be embodied, is to have a soul put into a body. Okay. Guys, there's so much more here to make sense of, but we've got 10 minutes, which is terrifying because we've got this whole other example that I'm going to run you through right now. Okay, so we're going to do a whole nother mashal and a whole nother nimshal, and we're going to do it really quickly. So whole nother mashal, whole nother story. Ready? This is another rabbi, Rabbi Chia, who's going to come in and teach. This meaning a soul who sins unintentionally. This may be compared to a priest who had two wives. One, the daughter of a priest, and the other, the daughter of an Israelite. And the priest handed to them the dough of terumah, which is priestly dough, and they rendered it impure. So his wives rendered it impure. The priest said to them, "Who made the dough impure?" Each said that the other had made it impure. What did the priest do? He let the daughter of the Israelite alone and began taking to task the daughter of the priestly family. Said she to him, "My lord the priest, why are you letting the daughter of the Israelite alone and taking me to task? Have you not handed it, the dough, to both of us alike?" Said he to her, "She is the daughter of an Israelite and is not trained in the laws about the dough from her father's house, but you are so trained from your father's house, and for this reason, I am leaving her alone and taking you to task." All right, so a totally different example, totally different paradigm, totally different mashal, supposedly illustrating the same thing. Once again, we have two different people. Here, they are wives of a priest, and one of them is the daughter of a priest, so she definitely knew what was what. One of them was just Joanne Schmosis or whatever. She didn't necessarily learn with mother's milk the laws of Truma. And here, the priest comes and only judges, only condemns the daughter of the priest. He doesn't judge, doesn't condemn the daughter of the Israelite, the daughter of the common person. We're going to jump right into the Nimshal and see what the Midrash does in applying this to the idea of soul and body and unintentional sin. Okay, reading again in the English. Even so will it be in the time to come. The soul and the body will be standing for judgment. What will the Holy One, blessed be he, do? He will let the body alone and take the soul to task. The latter, the soul, will say before God, "O Lord of the universe, we have sinned, both of us as one. Why dost thou let the body alone and take me to task?" He will answer the soul, "The body is from the lower earthly regions, from a place where they sin, but thou art from the upper celestial regions, from a place where they do not sin. Therefore, do I let the body alone and take you to task." All right. I say, wait a minute. We just did this same thing, and we were putting the body and soul back together and judging them as one. And now all of a sudden we're saying it's not the body's fault, it's just the soul's fault. And we're judging the body made to sin. The body is from the earth. The body is of sin in some way. The body doesn't have the knowledge. It doesn't have just like the priestly daughter had this knowledge, the soul has this knowledge and should have known better, and therefore only the soul is punished. Question for you guys, and it's a big question. How do you reconcile these two different examples? Is there a way to make sense of them together? Is there a way to say, okay, well, maybe sometimes the body and soul are punished together and sometimes only the soul should be punished? Are they applying to two different cases? is there a way to understand them as saying the same thing? They come right one after the other in the same midrash, saying what are ostensibly two different things. How do you square that circle? How do you put them together and make sense of it? Okay. Earl, both are true. Heidi, ooh, I love this. Unintentional sin can come about in more than one way. Scott, two ways to explain the same issue. All right, I want more from all three of you. I want you to flesh out those comments. Okay. Ooh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name necessarily. Ein says, the first example, the body and the soul, or the lame man and the blind man, are working together. But in the second story, they're not necessarily working together. And in those cases, perhaps you punish differently. Perhaps you judge differently. So maybe, Anya, thank you. So maybe that's describing two different types of unintentional sin. Okay. Earl, really, really quick.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry, getting through the check boxes. F. Scott Fitzgerald. It is the first-class mind that can hold two opposing opinions at the same time. So that's what I mean by both are true.
Great. Okay. That works. So there's a number of different ways to understand this text, right? And one way is to understand it as applying to different types of sins. One way is saying, okay, some sins are like very bodily things you do unintentionally, and some things are like the lies you tell yourself. And in those cases, in those two different cases, you would punish, you would judge, you would understand who's at fault differently. Another way to understand this is to look at what happens in life, right? And say, okay, when do people suffer? When are people punished? When are people held to account? And sometimes you see people suffer in life, right? You see people held to account in life. And sometimes you don't. And in those cases, we can read it with a midrash saying, okay, sometimes the melech, the king, is going to come and punish you with your body and life. And sometimes we get this olam haba, we get this in the world to come. It's the soul that will be held to account afterwards. Okay. Ooh, Tanya, I love the cheering. I'm going to take it was for that interpretation. Okay. There's a lot more to think about here, and what I'm going to challenge you to do once we all hang up is to go back through the second mashal in detail and see if you can make it line up with the idea of the blind man and the lame man, whether that's something that makes sense to talk about in terms of a priestly daughter and a normal or a commoner daughter. And then having done that, to say, okay, how do I take both of those and put them in conversation with the soul and the body? Y'all have my email. If you find something fascinating, I would love to hear it. Meanwhile, if you want to keep learning with me or keep learning with the Fuchsberg Jerusalem Center or the Conservative Yeshiva, we'd love to have you. I do teach a weekly Parashat HaShavua class, which meets every Friday, 15 minutes from now, from Eastern Standard Time, 11:30 to 12:30. You can email me and sign up. I also teach a number of other classes. You have my email, find me, and most of all, find the Conservative Yeshiva. We have a summer program in Jerusalem, which I don't know what your summer plans are, and they might not include coming to Jerusalem, but it's 3 weeks, and it is this kind of stuff all day, every day, and it is fantastic. So come learn with us. All right, thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you so much, Bex. It was so lovely to have you and your teaching. I'm wishing you all a wonderful Shabbat, and we will include the recording of this, the source sheet that Bex gave to us, and Bex's email in the follow-up email, which you'll receive shortly. Bex, best of luck in your next session, and we hope to see you all next week for Torah study. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.